It can be hard in times of peace to imagine or remember what life is like during war, and yet the effects of war last a lifetime. Wars can clearly alter the course of a nation's history, but they also affect the individual too. Everyone has different memories of the days of the war and when they ended, and there are as many different stories as there are people who lived through it.
It was a glorious day, wonderful, bright sunshine and very warm. In the afternoon, we got the news that everything had been signed. I was commanding a battery in my regiment, and we decided to celebrate by making a VE pattern in the sky. So we used our guns, I'm afraid, in order to paint the puffs with a great VE, which everybody would know about. That cost us 47 rounds, which we've never had to account for.
I do remember stopping in the middle of the lane, going home, taking off the shields that we used to have on the lamps with the little pin lights, and flooding the entire countryside with light. And that was a great thrill, you know. We thought, oh, light at last, you know, more ways than one. And when we got back home, I do remember us opening a bottle of champagne and having a toast to the peace of the future.
About 4 in the morning, I always bet that I wouldn't smoke a cigar. Immediately, Hitler was found to be dead. And, of course, I had never smoked anything in my life at all, which was a source of great amusement to everybody. And so, 8 o'clock in the morning, one of my friends arrived with the cigar. And he said, now, Hitler is dead, you will smoke it at once. So I did, and to the absolute fury of my friends, I wasn't ill.
On VE Day, I was on a boat called the Ben Reed. And the captain came running down from the bridge, jumping for joy. He was an old boy, and he said, VA Day, it's peace, you know, there's no more war. And we were all excited, and I remember taking off my life jacket and thinking, thank God it's all over. And then I thought, oh, I don't know, the message may not have got through to the U-boats or the E-boats that were about round there, so I put my life jacket back on.
I remember 2 things in particular. First of all, as evening fell, we had what was called divisions, where the ship's company assembled on the quarterdeck, and the chaplain conducted a service of thanksgiving for victory in Europe. And then, more enjoyable, later that evening a signal came through from the Admiral of the fleet ordering splice the main brace, which, as you may know, meant that everybody had a tot of rum, and so the off-duty watch went to their bunks happy.
Well, funnily enough, my first memory is pineapple chunks, the first time I'd ever eaten pineapple. My mother and I were down in Plymouth, my sister was still in Wales, and we went with some very old friends in the Navy onto his ship in Devonport and had this marvellous lunch with pineapple, and then stayed on, I thought it was afternoon, and then stayed on for the evening, and there was a tremendous fireworks show going on over Plymouth Sound.
I think banana was the thing I remember, never having seen before. I didn't know what it was, I can remember, and I think one of my younger sisters or brothers was attempting to eat the thing with the skin, which is quite difficult.
I remember the headlines of this Daily Express, which said, "Peace on Earth." And I remember the extraordinary friendship and closeness of the people in the street. And there was one particular old lady who kept chucking her arms up and screaming, "Praise the Lord for our victory." And she had to be restrained from doing the dance of the 7 veils, which for some reason she thought should be part of the celebration.
I had taken a trumpet up to town, just sensing, I suppose, you know, that it might be that kind of an occasion, which it was, because after we'd had the champagne, all my friends said, you better give us a tune on the trumpet. So in the middle of the crowd there, I just started playing the trumpet, and a little gap was made where people danced, and a band materialized from nowhere.
The thing I most recall was the stupefying experience of driving along a road in Austria in the middle of a mass of German soldiers without being molested in any way, and the ditches were slowly filling up with their equipment. They started by throwing away, of course, their weapons, then their helmets, then their, their gear, belts and so on, and finally just walked as far as they could home until they finally got there. And you did have the feeling, really, of a whole age coming to an end.
Away from Britain, VE Day is being commemorated in the cities that took the full force of the war, in the Allied capitals and in divided Berlin, in the countries that suffered occupation, and in the State of Israel, born out of the Holocaust and the death of 6 million Jews in Europe. Our reporters are in those countries this morning. We start in the Soviet Union, Britain's wartime ally 40 years ago.
This is Tim Ewart in Moscow, where they'll be holding the biggest victory celebrations since the end of the war. In a city now draped in red, memories of the momentous events of 40 years ago have been stirred as never before. The preparations have been tireless. Now the nation will take a 2-day holiday. The memories here are especially painful. 20 million perished during the war. Of all Russian youths aged 17 in 1941, only 3 out of every 100 survived. So the war has not become distant history. It's kept alive partly due to incessant propaganda, but in a nation that suffered so deeply, the pain would anyway not have been forgotten. This VE Day anniversary has presented to the Soviets none of the awkward problems that have arisen in the West. No ambivalence here over how it should best be celebrated. The Russians will simply be rejoicing in a great victory, a victory in which they believe they played the leading role. VE Day actually falls here tomorrow. It'll be marked by an unprecedented parade of military might in Red Square. Already the massive build-up for the parade has begun. The truckloads of soldiers, the only visible sign, the tanks and missiles waiting in the wings.
This is Ian Glover-James in Poland, where the new concrete of high-rise Warsaw stands in stark contrast to the scenes of utter devastation 40 years ago. This shattered 18th century terrace is now a shrine to Warsaw's wartime suffering. 6 million Poles died during World War II, and the memory of those appalling years for Poland is kept alive with military precision here at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. The streets of Warsaw are filled with reminders of massacre. Nazis shot 100 here, 30 more here, 56,000 Jews died here in the ghetto, another 400,000 were herded out to death camps. Child warriors of the Warsaw Rising are remembered here, but those who struck back against the Nazis paid a terrible price. 80,000 were held, beaten and tortured in the Gestapo headquarters, now a museum, before transfer to Pawiak prison and the concentration camps. No city suffered like Warsaw in World War II. No nation lost so great a proportion of her people. Beneath its rebuilt walls, the scars still remain.
This is Desmond Hamill in East Berlin, where today's anniversary is considered a big event, and certainly nothing of which to be ashamed. Here in Treptow Park, the official wreaths are borne in, wreaths to commemorate the Soviet soldiers who died in the final battles for Berlin. 20,000 of them are buried here in 5 huge graves, all unmarked. The Soviets are seen here as liberators who freed the people from Hitler's fascist terrorism. And it's for them the East German soldiers parade. And the leaders stand solemn-faced to pay their tribute. Behind them, the crowd building up so that they too, in their turn, can come forward. And still the people stream into this huge park to pay their tribute. But apart from this very solemn moment, today is seen as a joyful occasion here, and it's in that spirit that the rest of the day will be celebrated here in the capital. But it will be some time before this huge crowd clears, a crowd which is honoring the Soviet dead. The German soldiers who fell in battle are not remembered like this.
This is Michael Brunson in West Berlin, where the parades and celebrations and flags of East Berlin, just visible across the wall which divides this city, are finding no match today. For West Berliners tell you that they need no reminding of World War II and what it did. They live with it every day of their lives, they tell you, with the division of their city, and it's partly for that reason that the commemoration here has been and will be a quiet affair. And it's also because West Berliners don't want to do anything today to increase their sense of isolation. already quite apparent with the Berlin Wall and the East German flags beyond it. So they held their commemorations here yesterday with a meeting at the Reichstag building. Today they will be content to observe the commemorations, to watch and listen to the events in Cologne and Bonn.
About 1,000 people, though, wanted to show their feelings in public last evening, and so they came to the main square of West Berlin and the great church, part of which, like Coventry Cathedral, is kept in ruins. Indeed, a cross from Coventry, sent here as a mark of reconciliation, led priests and pastors and rabbis to a joint service in the square. There were people here who lived through that war, and people here who weren't born when it ended. A new war starts, said the single banner, when the last one is forgotten.